Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, we'll look at how some university students might soon pay more for tuition. Christopher Newport and Old Dominion are considering increases up to 4%. The Navy is introducing a new nutritional program for sailors.
At the end of the day, dinner time, we're having to replenish every single thing all over again.
A federal judge wants to hear more from former Sentara executives in a fraud investigation. And finally, reporter Ryan Murphy sits down with WHRO's Connor Worley to talk about what's been going on this week in Virginia Beach. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Conservative groups wanting to save the whales? You heard that right. They are suing Dominion Energy over its offshore wind project in Virginia Beach. WHRO's Catherine Hafner breaks it down.
The new lawsuit argues the federal government failed to properly consider how offshore wind farms like Virginia's could harm endangered whales. Scientists say there's no evidence of whales being affected by the growing industry. Several groups behind the new suit have a history of denying climate change and opposing renewable energy projects. One of them is the Heartland Institute. Here's what President James Taylor told WHRO last year.
We're looking to protect American standard of living. We're looking to protect affordable, reliable energy. But when you also see this environmental devastation, it just begs for us to get involved and to stand up for wildlife as well.
Whales have been dying along the East Coast at an unusual rate for nearly a decade, but officials say boat strikes and entanglement in fishing gear are usually to blame. Dominion says the lawsuit's claims have no merit and that the company has several measures in place to protect whales. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Christopher Newport and Old Dominion universities will consider raising tuition for in-state undergraduates in the coming month. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson reports.
Christopher Newport will consider raising tuition and mandatory fees up to 4.2%. Old Dominion will consider raising undergraduate tuition up to 5% and mandatory fees up to 7%. It's the second year both schools are considering increases following several years of keeping costs stable in exchange for state funding. The tuition freeze started in 2019. State lawmakers budgeted $52 million for public colleges that didn't increase their tuition. Schools could still increase fees, which ODU did a few times since then. Lawmakers continue to offer some funding for schools to maintain tuition levels, but Governor Glenn Youngkin only encouraged schools to do so last year with no financial incentive. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
William & Mary has received a $30 million donation to transform an unused residence hall into a space for global security research. We get the details from WHRO's Ryan Murphy.
Brown Hall was built in the 1930s and housed different kinds of students until the university closed it in 2021. Now, a major donation by an anonymous trustee of the university's foundation will fund the building's renovation. When it reopens, it'll be christened Gates Hall after William & Mary alumnus, former Secretary of State, and current University Chancellor Robert Gates. The new academic hall will house 3 different centers already in place at the university that cover disciplines from national security to the environment. The idea is putting them all in one building will help them collaborate on solving global problems and create a hub where students can learn from all of them. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
The Williamsburg-James City County School Board approved a new budget increasing staff salaries. WHRO's Laura Fillion covered the story.
WJCC passed a 4.5% raise for district employees. Marco Sardi is an orchestra teacher. He's also the president of the Williamsburg-James City County Education Association.
4.5% will keep the lights on. Whether it is going to be bold enough for staff to really want to stick around is going to be remaining to be seen.
Superintendent Olwyn Herron proposed a budget with a 3% increase, but some board members and district staff said it didn't go far enough. One concern was staying competitive with surrounding localities, which are considering as much as a 5.5% salary increase. The school district's budget isn't final. It depends on funding from the state and city and county governments. Laura Fillion, WHRO News.
We should note Williamsburg-James City County School District is a member of WHRO, which holds the license for the WHRO stations. And multiple JCC school board members also serve on WHRO boards. They were called combat con artists, and this week the nation bestowed the Congressional Gold Medal on men who created whole platoons of troops that didn't exist. Jay Price of the American Homefront Project reports on a long, secret Army unit that helped win World War II with battlefield deception.
The story of what's become known as the Ghost Army plays like a good caper movie. Its soldiers impersonated American generals, deployed formations of fake inflatable trucks and tanks, and drunkenly spread misinformation in bars across Europe.
The Ghost Army was unique in that they integrated all these techniques into a process that was highly believable.
Retired Brigadier General Ed Burley was a senior commander in Army psychological operations, where he says the Ghost Army's basic approach is still used to deceive enemies.
They integrated visual things like inflatable tanks and cannons and jeeps, so that there would be visual proof to, say, a German airplane that there was an enemy unit there. But they reinforced it with loudspeakers, making it so that okay, it sounds like trucks and things moving around. They then added fake radio traffic.
The Ghost Army's goal was to confuse the Germans about the movements and locations of real combat units. Its work was so secretive that even most of the 1,100 soldiers in it weren't given the big picture. 99-year-old George Dramus of Raleigh was a Ghost Army radio operator.
Guys would talk amongst themselves, figure, why did we do this? Why did we do that? We guessed at it, pretty much.
Dramus's job was to send fake radio transmissions by Morse code, that mix of dots and dashes. German intelligence intercepted American radio traffic, so Ghost Army radio operators carefully mimicked the Morse code transmissions of real American units, even using names and fake personal news.
Things like, so-and-so got another stripe today, Sergeant so-and-so.
Experienced radio operators can often identify each other by their so-called fist, their style of hitting those dots and dashes. So Dramus had to impersonate that, too.
Yeah, it wasn't hard. Most guys were choppers who had the hand key.
In addition to the inflatable props, sound effects, and fake radio traffic, the Ghost Army later added a fourth element it called special effects, physically impersonating soldiers in other U.S. units.
And so they're putting on phony patches. They're painting on phony markings on their trucks. They have, some lieutenant or some captain who's portraying a colonel or a general in order to fool enemy spies.
Rick Beyer directed a PBS documentary and co-authored a book about the Ghost Army.
In one deception, the officer and his sergeant went into 19 bars and basically had a drink at each one and announced that the 6th Armored Division was coming through. And they said that by the end of the evening, that they might have been pretty drunk, but every single person in the town of Wren believed that the 6th Armored Division was coming in because of what they had done.
The culmination of their work, their masterpiece, was successfully impersonating 2 full Army divisions so those units could sneak over the Rhine River into Germany's industrial heart, 1,100 men trying to seem like 30,000. The Ghost Army got a commendation letter for that, but it doesn't say what they did. It was a secret then, and even decades after the war ended, their exploits remained classified in case the military had to do the same things again. And so the Ghost Army vanished in a new way.
Ironically, because it was so deeply classified, the Army kind of forgot about it until the late 80s when they suddenly rediscovered this and started bringing Ghost Army soldiers to the Pentagon for briefings on what they had done and picked it up again.
Beyer and others fought for years to finally get the Ghost Army its congressional medal. Just 7 men from the unit are still alive to appreciate the honor. I'm Jay Price, reporting.
Sailors are about to eat a whole lot healthier. The Navy is introducing the Go Green program to raise the nutritional bar for its service members. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh went to the galley at Naval Station Norfolk.
The galley is the place where young sailors living in the barracks eat most of their meals. They can't cook in their rooms, and they don't have the budget to eat outside the base. The Navy is using the captive audience to promote better nutrition, providing increasing numbers of fruits and vegetables. Chief Warrant Officer Larry Lavelle is the galley's food service officer. He says the program's working.
At the end of the day, dinner time, we're having to replenish every single thing all over again. And we have to maintain a weekly stock of produce and vegetables because, they're killing it. They love it.
Nutrition charts throughout the galley make it easier for sailors to identify the best option. Part of the success is that sailors must meet annual physical requirements and are often preparing to deploy. The Go Green program started in 2016, but it continues to expand each quarter. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Portsmouth's Rivers Casino pumped millions of dollars into city coffers in its first full year of operation. WHRO's Barry Graham shares more.
The casino didn't open until mid-January last year, so this year's February numbers from the Virginia Lottery give the full year figure. About $17.8 million was the city's 12-month share of taxes on the casino games. That doesn't account for the real estate tax, more than $2 million, and about $700,000 in meals and other taxes collected. Before the casino went up, it was estimated that it would mean about $16 million in annual revenue. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Former Sentara executives have been recalled to court by a federal judge. It's all about a fraud investigation. WHRO's Laura Fillion reported the story.
The Department of Justice is investigating whether Optima Health and its parent company Sentara lied to federal regulators and pocketed $665 million in premiums. In recently unsealed court documents, a federal judge ordered former Optima CEO Michael Dudley and former Optima actuary James Juirat to answer more questions about the company's rate reporting in 2018 and 2019. In places like Charlottesville, Optima, now called Sentara Health Plans, had a monopoly and charged exorbitant prices for coverage. Dudley and Juirat have to appear in federal court in Roanoke within 60 days of the order, which was issued March 8th. Laura Fillion, WHRO News.
A new report from Old Dominion University says you've got to make a lot more this year in order to buy a house in Hampton Roads. WHRO's Ryan Murphy breaks down the reasons.
Between price increases and climbing interest rates, the average local home buyer needs to make $48,000 more annually to afford a mortgage than they did a year ago. A new real estate forecast from ODU's E.V. Williams Center for Real Estate shows evidence the Hampton Roads housing market is loosening up a little bit, but that hasn't translated to declining prices. Home sales have come way down from their pandemic peak. 2023 saw 40% fewer closings than the high point in 2021. And homes are now spending close to a month on the market, as opposed to the 1 week most were listed for before being snapped up in early 2022. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Governor Glenn Youngkin has been busy with his veto stamp. One of the bills he turned down might have increased composting. The story from Virginia Public Media's Michael Pope.
The governor is pulling out his veto pen and rejecting a bill introduced by Senate Majority Leader Scott Surville that would have allowed local governments to require supermarkets and convenience stores to separate waste from compost. Here's Surville explaining why he introduced the bill.
According to the EPA, about 85% of food scraps are burned instead of reused. And one of the ways we can use less fracked methane is to use anaerobic digestion, either with animal waste, food waste, other kinds of organic waste. You throw it in a big tub and you bake it. It generates methane. You can put that in the pipe and burn it in your furnace or your stove instead of using fracked methane.
One of the supporters of the bill was Andrew Casserly at Bioenergy Devco.
The bill allows localities to extend the lifespan of their landfills and meet climate mitigation goals by implementing regulations to divert food waste and organic material from the waste stream.
In his veto message, the governor said he's in favor of promoting sustainable waste management, but he also said he's worried about the burden this would place on businesses to comply if local governments use the law to create new requirements. Michael Pope.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
North Carolina Democratic Congressman Jeff Jackson apologized recently for his vote to potentially ban TikTok. There's a twist. He has built a rather large following there. We get that story from WFAE's Steve Harrison.
When Jackson voted to ban the app, unless the Chinese company ByteDance sells its stake, many of his 2.5 million TikTok followers turned on him. TikTokers said he was a hypocrite. In a video on TikTok, Jackson apologized for how he handled the vote, but not the vote itself. He acknowledged he had been, quote, roasted on the app.
And I get it. If I were in your shoes, I would probably feel the same way. I would see someone who used this app to build a following and then appears to have voted against it, and I would be upset.
Jackson said, as a member of Congress, he's heard alarming briefings on TikTok and wants it to be sold. He said he doesn't think the app would ultimately be banned. He's running for North Carolina Attorney General against Republican Congressman Dan Bishop, who voted against the ban, citing First Amendment issues. I'm Steve Harrison.
Rosie's Gaming Emporium in Hampton will stay open around the clock after a unanimous vote from that city's council. WHRO's Laura Fillion is back with that story.
Colonial Downs LLC, which owns Rosie's, asked Hampton to extend its hours. The company says it wants to be able to compete with Portsmouth's Rivers Casino, which opened early last year and operates 24 hours a day. The motion Wednesday night carried the same conditions as the original permit for Rosie's. It also asked for an updated security plan for the venue since it'll now be open all night. Laura Fillion, WHRO News.
Many young people from around the world find work at Virginia Beach during tourist season, but finding a place to live can be a problem. Virginia Beach's City Council approved a proposal this week allowing one oceanfront business to try a solution. WHRO's Ryan Murphy has the details.
The owners of Sensations want to turn the building's second floor into housing for students working under J1 visas. About 1,000 such students work at the oceanfront each summer. The plan includes 86 beds across 11 rooms with curtains between the beds. There would be an on-site manager around the clock, a common area for cooking, and separate men's and women's bathrooms. A recent housing report from the city shows many retail and restaurant workers who staff the oceanfront often don't make enough money to live in Virginia Beach. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
WHRO's Connor Worley sat down with Ryan to discuss the new residential situation for workers at the oceanfront and Virginia Beach's budget proposal, all from this week's City Council meeting.
Ryan, thanks for joining me. You've been doing a lot of reporting in Virginia Beach recently. One of the main things you've been talking about is the housing situation for international workers down at the oceanfront with Sensations. What are the circumstances that led to the point where a business felt the need to create this living situation?
When 1,000 temporary workers flood into the oceanfront area and they need a place to stay for 3, 4, 5 months, locating them housing is not necessarily easy, and it's part of the job of the business that's employing them, that's sponsoring their visa to find them housing. And so that, combined with the fact that housing in Virginia Beach in general is just sort of difficult to find, the market's tight, rental prices are pretty high. One of the recent studies from the city showed that a lot of folks who work at the oceanfront don't make enough money to rent a normal place in the city. And so the idea is here, they were like, well, we've got this empty space on the second floor. We can house a bunch of folks who work at our shop plus a bunch of folks who work in the hotels and the restaurants and whatever. And so I think they saw it as a way to both reuse unused space that they had that was formerly an indoor golf course that's not been open for a while, and also make it easier on them trying to find somewhere for these folks to stay.
So is this for sure going to be a temporary seasonal measure, or is this something that they're also looking at that could be more long-term?
So right now it's just meant to house these J1 visa workers who are generally here for the resort season. I spoke to Dee Naknani, who runs the Atlantic Avenue Association, the oceanfront business group there, and he said the ideal is they'll get enough action going at the oceanfront year-round that they have staffing needs year-round, and therefore this dorm facility is basically filled with these visa holders year-round. But for right now, I think the expectation is probably just for the bulk of the resort season and maybe a little outside, front and back, to house these summertime workers. Mm-hmm. At council last night, the lawyer for the applicant, the owner of Sensations, said, they've got workers at Sensations who are on these visas, but it's not just going to be 80 employees for Sensations. It's going to be employees from other hotels, restaurants, shops. But it sounds like they're expecting it to be full, and I don't see why it wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. How quickly are they going to get this up and running?
As far as I understand, they're going to get working on it right away, but I'm not sure how quickly they'll be able to turn it around or if it'll be in use this year.
Have you heard any pushback from other businesses or places around the oceanfront that are hesitant about the idea?
At City Council, a couple of concerns cropped up, City Council members expressing concerns they had heard, mostly about, are we sure that this number of people packed into this space, 8 people per room, is that going to allow for enough room? Is it going to be safe, sanitary, clustering all these people together? The applicant said yes. The city says we've got inspectors and zoning folks who will be making sure that everything is up to snuff for safety and for sanitation and all that sort of stuff.
Turning our sights to the Virginia Beach City Council meeting where the city manager presented the budget, what was sort of the leading issue on the budget?
So the big thing that got a lot of talk and that the city highlighted was they are reducing the tax rate by 2%. The tax rate is how many cents per $100 of value your home is worth are you going to get taxed. The other side of that equation, though, is that the value of the home, that rate is weighed against. Home values have been going up dramatically since the start of the pandemic. This past year, they're up more than 7%. So 2% cut on the rate, but 7% increase on the home value. The average homeowner is still going to end up paying something like 5% more on their tax bill than they did the previous year.
What else is in this budget that people should be concerned about or care about?
The big one is the Rudy Loop Park. There was a lot of discussion for years about what do we do with this property right down at the end of the south end of the ocean front. The city council said we're going to turn it into a park, and that money is now in the city budget, and it's going to happen fast. A couple million this year to get all the design and prep work done, and then the rest of it, totaling $60 million in the next year's budget, will get that park done. One thing that folks who have been paying attention will be aware of is there's been a lot of discussion about curbside recycling. And it's an issue that a lot of people care a lot about. And ultimately, the city council's talked a lot about it. But what they came up with is if we want to keep curbside recycling because it's gotten more expensive, we're basically going to have to double the fees that homeowners, the people who use curbside recycling, are paying. So that increase is in this budget. It's $3.05 per month. That works out to like $36 a year, which effectively is doubling the recycling fee that homeowners are going to pay. It's not a huge amount for a lot of people, but that is notable because it will allow the city to keep the curbside recycling going, which was a big concern of a lot of people that this was going to disappear like what happened in Chesapeake.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your reporting. And if you'd like to read more in depth about his reporting and everything else going on in the Hampton Roads area, you can go to WHRO.org. For Ryan Murphy, I'm Connor Worley.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from Brian Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Laura Fillion, and Steve Walsh, VPM's Michael Pope, WFAE's Steve Harrison, and Jay Price with the American Homefront Project. Also Connor Worley, who produced today's program. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed anytime. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.